Hello. So today's notes, we're going to start out with a couple of short videos. They're under 3 minutes each. I'm going to put the share link up on the screen so you can write that down if you have trouble hearing it. But I'm using my microphone, so I think you'll be able to hear it okay. This is the share link. It is case sensitive. That letter right behind the 2, that is most likely a lowercase l. But that would be the link. All right. And now let's check out the video.
Food chain is a single path which helps us work out who eats whom in a habitat in order to get the energy and materials required for nutrition. Ultimately, the sun is the initial source of energy for nearly all living things. The food chain begins with an organism that can utilize this energy directly to make its own food. The arrows in the food chain follow the flow of energy, so they always go from the food and point to the feeder. So for example, the grass uses energy from the sun, the zebra eats the grass, a lion then eats the zebra. Think of it as the food's journey into the mouth of the next organism. The chain always ends with the top predator, which is not preyed upon by other organisms, but will be consumed by decomposers after death. Typically, food chains involve around 4 steps. It is unusual for them to be longer because energy is lost between each step, and so the energy available for the next organism decreases. It is lost in a number of ways. It can be lost as heat during respiration, or it can be lost in waste materials such as feces. When you consider all the food chains in the habitat and join them all together to get a food web, a diagram of the interconnections between lots of organisms, populations are interdependent on each other, and you will notice that some organisms have more than one predator, whilst others don't. This means that when a food web is altered, it has different effects on different populations. If one species goes extinct, it can affect the entire system with unpredictable results. So let's take the food web of a woodland environment as an example. This food web is the combination of 11 different food chains, so we can start to see how the species are interdependent on one another. So what happens if we remove one species from the food chain? Perhaps if it went extinct? Well, to figure it out, we have to look at the whole food web. If we remove grasshoppers, then the spiders would have to eat more beetles, and so their population would decline. Maybe even go extinct too. This then has a knock-on effect on all species that feed on the beetles and so on. However, some population sizes will increase. If there are less individuals eating the green plants, then their population will increase, which provides more food for the snails. So altering one link in the food web has big consequences for the whole system.
All right. And so I'm going to close that tab. And we have one more, and then we'll get to a few notes. All right. This one is on trophic levels.
A trophic level is a step in a food chain of an ecosystem. The organisms in a food chain are classified into their trophic level depending on their feeding behavior. The number of steps an organism is from the start of the food chain is the measure of its trophic level. So the first trophic level is the primary producers, the organisms which produce their own food, usually the green plants or algae. These organisms are also referred to as autotrophs. From the producers, the second trophic level is the herbivores, the organisms that eat the plants. These organisms are called the primary consumers. They are the first step where nutrients are consumed. Level 3 is carnivores, who eat herbivores. They are eating organisms from level 2, so they are the secondary consumers. Secondary consumers are followed by tertiary consumers. Level 4 is carnivores who eat other carnivores. Level 5 is the apex predators, the top of the food chain, where the organism isn't eaten by other animals. Decomposers are also considered to occupy their own trophic level. They break down dead animal and plant matter, also known as detritivores. These categories are not strictly defined, as many organisms feed on several trophic levels. For example, some carnivores also consume plant materials. Now let's look at the trophic levels in this community. The first trophic level is the primary producers, the grass. Level 2 is the primary consumers, which is the rabbits. The third trophic level is secondary consumers, which in this example is the fox. Followed by the eagle, which is the tertiary consumer, level 4. We've included decomposers as trophic level 5. In this example, it's the fungi. So to summarise, trophic levels are the number of steps an organism is within a food chain. The first trophic level is usually the green plants, the producers, and as you go up a trophic level and you go along a food chain of an ecosystem, you move on to the consumers, and finally the decomposers.
All right, so that is our review from the last few days of notes. And then that brings us, I'm going to put my little floating head up here, if it'll, won't let me go higher. All right, so now we're going to move on to biogeochemical cycles. Okay, and that sounds really complicated and scary, but I promise you it's not. Bio just means life, geo means earth, chemical means chemical. So remember before break, we talked about how matter in an ecosystem is constantly being recycled over and over again. Well, this is how the matter gets recycled. Okay, so at the end of these notes, we should at least be able to define biogeochemical cycle, and we should at least be able to summarize the water cycle, which you should probably know from like every year of science you've ever had. We know that 10% of the energy passes up the food chain and 90% is lost as heat. We talked about that last class. Matter is not lost. It's just recycled through the ecosystem, right? Okay, so now I'm going to exit out of full screen. Sorry. Let's see here. So I'm going to highlight, those, and you need to copy those down. Water moves from, water and nutrients are constantly being recycled through the biotic and the abiotic parts. A deer drinks water. The water goes through the deer, goes through the deer's kidneys, ends up in the deer's bladder. The deer pees. The water runs into the pee runs into a stream. It's now part of an abiotic part of the ecosystem. Okay, so it's constantly being recycled through these living and non-living parts. Water moves from an organism to the atmosphere, which is part of the geosphere. So let's see here. An exchange pool holds part of the cycle for a short time. So the atmosphere is an exchange pool. I don't think we really need to know that one. A reservoir is a part of the cycle that holds a substance for a long period of time. That one I do want you to know. The oxygen, or the ocean rather, is a reservoir for water. Okay, so it holds water for a very long time. Even though water is constantly evaporating out of the ocean and condensing in the atmosphere and raining back down either on land or on ocean, but it still, there's water in the ocean that's probably been there for millions of years. Let's see how long this one is. I'm not going to stress you over a 6-minute video in this Loom. But it is, let's see here. Let's go to the YouTube link, and we're not going to watch it, but I think after this loom, I'm going to have to restart my computer. All right. So here's the share link. You can see that. Again, I'm pretty sure those are lowercase L's. If there were lowercase i's, they would probably have dots above them. But it is, remember, these are case-sensitive links. So you have to type it exactly as you see it. All right, so I'm going to close that. If you want to watch that, feel free. It's a pretty good video, but it is 6 minutes long. All right, the water cycle. So we're going to write that down. Life cannot exist without water. There is not a single living thing on the planet Earth that doesn't need at least some water. I really like cacti and succulents. They don't need as much water as other plants, but they still need H2O to live. They just need less of it than other plants. I also have several peace lilies, and you can actually. I won't say that it's the best environment for them, but you could put them in a pot of water. Take them out of their flower pot, wash the soil off the roots, put them in a pot of water, and they would continue to live. Okay, so it varies depending on the organism and what environment it evolved in. Earth does have a limited amount of water, and I know people. Well, the ocean covers 70% of the Earth. Yeah, give or take. But here's the thing: most of that H2O, it has dissolved salts in it, and we can't drink that. It would actually dehydrate us to drink salt water. Okay, so we don't want to drink that. Only about 3% of all the water on Earth is drinkable fresh water. And of that 3%, 2% of it is currently frozen in ice caps and glaciers. Now, I hear some of you are like, well, the glaciers are melting, so there we go. No, that water is running into the oceans, so it's becoming salt water. And that causes all kinds of problems. First of all, it changes ocean salinity. That's going to affect every living thing in the ocean. It's also going to affect ocean levels. The ocean levels will rise because now there's more water in the ocean. That means there's less land, coastal areas. Everybody's like, oh, I live on the beach and it's so nice. Yeah, your beach house is going to get flooded. Okay, if all the ice on Earth melts, okay, that's going to be a problem for you. It's going to be a problem for a lot of people. Also, once that ice is gone, there's less ice reflecting heat back into space, which means the planet and the oceans are going to warm up. If you think global warming is bad now, if the ice caps and the glaciers melt, it's going to get a lot worse faster. Okay, so we don't want the ice caps to melt. Okay, so that even though there is a lot of water on Earth, most of it we can't drink. And more of what we can drink is becoming polluted because of human actions. There aren't deer out there polluting. There aren't bears or koala bears polluting the Earth. It's humans. Okay? So we've got to start thinking about that and trying to take better care of the Earth. All right. Evaporation. Write that down. If you don't know what evaporation is, please write down the definition. If you do, then maybe we don't need to write it down. But I would at least write down the word evaporation as a step in the water cycle. Sublimation, you probably are not as familiar with. So sublimation is when snow and ice change directly to water vapor without melting. Should have taken a picture of my car this morning. Okay. Everybody who went outside this morning, if you went out before the sun got up, your car was probably covered in ice. That's sublimation. Water vapor in the air started to condense and changed to a solid state on the surface of your cars. That frost, as we call it, is the result of sublimation. Okay? I'm sorry. That's wrong. I am wrong. You didn't catch it. You didn't catch it. You pay attention, man. I was wrong totally on purpose. Yes, I was wrong on purpose. Sublimation is when snow and ice changes directly to a water vapor, to a gas. This is what dry ice does. Okay, so that's that. I said that wrong. I apologize for totally tricking you with the wrong definition there. Yep. So, yes, sublimation is the change from a solid state to a gaseous state. Transpiration is, but anyway, what I was thinking with the frost is deposition, is the opposite of sublimation. My apologies. All right, transpiration is water vapor being released by the leaves of plants. All right, and then plant uptake. So here we're talking about plants taking water from the soil. This is why we have to water our potted plants, why it rains on earth, so that the water seeps into the soil and the plants can take up that moisture. And then it goes up through the xylem of the plant. That's their vascular tissue. Xylem carries moisture or water up to the leaves. Cellular respiration and photosynthesis take place in the plant cells. And then water vapor is released through the stomata, okay, after cellular respiration along with the oxygen. Okay. Condensation is the opposite of evaporation, so you should know that, but please at least write down the word. Precipitation, you should know from like every year of science ever, especially from 7th grade, okay, when you did weather. Precipitation is any water falling from the sky. So whether it's snow or sleet or rain, it is precipitation. Okay. Runoff. This is one that might be slightly new to you. You've probably heard it before if you had some environmental lessons. Runoff is when the rain falls, and instead of landing on soil where it can soak in, it lands on something where it can't soak in. Maybe it's saturated soil that can't contain any more water, or maybe it's concrete or asphalt, and the water runs off and it goes downhill wherever it can go. And one of the problems with runoff is it can carry pollution with it. So if it rains really hard and fast on your yard after you fertilize the grass, then it's going to carry that fertilizer with it, and that can cause problems in lakes and streams called algal blooms. We'll talk about those later. Infiltration, okay? When the rain has enough time to seep into the soil, to soak down into the soil, that's infiltration. The water infiltrates the soil, okay? Or the soil layers. Accumulation is the collection of precipitation in bodies of water. So lakes, rivers, streams, they accumulate water. We also talk about snow accumulation, okay? Like tonight, everybody's probably going to be hoping that it snows overnight, and there's accumulation so that we don't have to come to school tomorrow. Okay? By the way, today is 1/7/2021. So if you're watching this any other day than today, please disregard the weather-related information. Here is a diagram And you can see there's groundwater storage. Infiltration is the water coming into the soil. We have blue arrows showing snow melt runoff, water storage in the ice and snow. We have red arrow showing condensation and one showing sublimation. So you have these layers of ice and snow on mountains and glaciers. Some of that water vapor will change to a gas and rejoin the atmosphere. This happens in your freezer too. If you've ever heard of someone talk about freezer burn, this is sublimation is freezer burn. You've got a steak in the freezer, it's completely frozen, but over time, the longer it's in there, some of the water vapor or some of the water molecules in the solid frozen steak will change to a gas. And as they escape the steak, that becomes freezer burnt steak. It's not really burnt, but it's not going to look right. It might have a little bit weird texture if it's severely freezer burnt. Okay. Study jams on water cycle. Again, you can look that up. And then that. So this one, I think I have to present to get through this one. You don't need to copy this down. You certainly could if you wanted to, but I don't think you have to. So as we go through this, we have precipitation from the clouds. Some of it's going to seep into the soil. Some of it's going to run off. So we have a stream here, or as it runs off. We have accumulation in the pond. Right? We have infiltration as it seeps into the soil on the other side of the pond. We have plant uptake. So the plant is uptaking H2O through its roots. We have transpiration as the leaves are releasing water vapor. We have evaporation. So we have water vapor evaporating into the atmosphere. Transpiration is part of that. Some textbooks will combine the two words into evapotranspiration. And then lastly, we have condensation. And when there's enough condensation in a cloud, then a storm cloud will form and you have precipitation and so forth and so on. Okay. So moving on. All right. Time for a quiz. Not really a quiz, but just, some practice. The diagram shows the amount of available energy decreasing while moving up the trophic levels in an energy pyramid. Which statement best explains the reason for the decrease in available energy with each higher trophic level? Read that again. Pause and read that again if you need to. It was a lot. Okay. So what they've done is they've given you this information. They are handing you on a silver platter information. Okay. And then this part down here, that's the actual question. Right? So which explains why there's a decrease of energy as you go up the energy level. Some energy is lost in the environment. Some energy is converted into non-living matter. Some energy is consumed by the producers. And some energy is broken down by the decomposers. Okay? So pause, think about it, think about your answer. All right, welcome back. Let's see. Do I have the answer on another slide? I do not. All right, so I think the best answer here, energy is not converted into non-living matter. That would be a nuclear reaction of some sort. We're talking speed of light and weird things happening in the physical universe. That's not going to happen. Energy is consumed by the producers. Producers don't consume. So that's wrong. Some energy is broken down by the decomposers. Decomposers break down matter, not energy. Okay, so some energy is lost to the environment. Yeah, it's called body heat. Even Exotherms, like snakes, what we call cold-blooded animals, they get their body heat from their environment. So that's why they sun themselves on a rock or something, or why you have a heat lamp if you have a pet reptile. But even them, they lose some of that heat to the environment. Okay, so yeah, that's why they're not as active during the winter. All right, so I'm going to stop there. Next up will be the carbon cycle. Have a good day. Stay curious.